Welcome back to another weekly GMBN Tech show. As you might notice, it's Retro Week here at GMBN and GMBN Tech, which means there's loads of cool retro-related content going on across both GMBN and, of course, here on Tech. On this week's show, we're going to be looking at some news that relates to tech back in the day, and we're going to be delving into the history of mountain biking a bit. Okay, so first up, let's jump into the news, and I'm really pleased to show off the new Nukeproof Horizon range in purple anodized, which couldn't have been better timed.
Does look good, doesn't it?
So purple back in the day was like the anodized colour of choice. I'm going to throw to a little montage of some random purple stuff where you see that they got their inspiration from. So I'm over the moon that Nukeproof have now applied purple to their full Horizon range, in addition to copper and red and I think black and all the other colours they got. But what do you like from the range, Henry?
It does look good. I remember my friend had a white Uzi, intense Uzi.
Oh, there's a bike.
With anodized purple parts, and it just looks amazing.
Yeah.
I think actually the Horizon flat and clipless pedals, the clipless pedals were great anyway.
Yeah.
But now they've updated the engagement
I think they've improved them, haven't they? Yeah.
And what I really like is this new engagement system is retrofittable if you've got the standard models.
Amazing.
Do you see what I mean?
So you don't have to just buy the new pedals.
You don't have to buy the new pedals, which I think is really nice.
Way to go, Nukeproof. That's
much
more manufacturers that do that, to be honest.
Totally.
That's a really cool system. They've got all the cool purple stuff. You've already seen Peak, I think it was on Sam Hill's bike, the bit of a divider in colour, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I quite liked it. But
a black frame with purple parts as well. Just accents.
It's just tidy, isn't it?
Looks so good.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Do you like purple or do you hate it? Let us know in those comments underneath.
There was also the release of a new hardtail from Specialized, the Fuse, which has been updated. So now it's 29-inch wheels, 130mm of travel, and going from extra small to extra large, with between 400 and 480mm reach.
That's a good range of sizing.
And it looks actually really, really good.
I think, is this it now? This looks really aggressive, actually.
It does, yeah.
It looks more like a jump bike, I think, than a trail hardtail.
And if you told people a couple of years ago, you could get a really fun to ride 29er, 130mm travel hardtail, they'd be like, you mean a sort of a rugged cross-country bike? But I think this would actually be super fun to ride.
I think, you're right. You could do a lot of different things on this.
Yeah.
I'm really pleased that Specialized have done this because this kind of reminds me of what I deem the original hardcore hardtail as ridden by Jason McCroy, or the late Jason McCroy. Have a look on screen now and look at this, and now look at the new version. There's kind of a bit of a likeness there,
totally.
the radically sloping top tube, but you think that JMC's bike, we're talking here, a 94 issue Specialized M2. Works. I forget what it's called, to be honest, but look at it. It's an amazing looking bike. And also on the front of that, it's got a 3-inch rise Azonic handlebars, so it's almost like a BMX style position on there. Grip shift, X-rays, early Avid brake levers before they had anything to do with SRAM, and they were like a little bespoke CNC manufacturers company. Plenty of cool anodized bits on there. Those awful, I've got to say, sorry Jason, but those Odyssey triple trap pedals were rubbish. They wrecked my shins because that's what they were good at. They weren't good at gripping your shoes. They just used to wreck your legs.
Just cheese graters.
But they're kind of cool in a bit of a weird nostalgic way. I don't know why. They just are. But yeah, RFP Jace, like you, inspiration to everyone, I think.
Big time. Also, we had PT Sealant a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Showcasing actually a really cool product that comes in this nice, well thought out packaging. And they're now stepping it up into the aerosol game, I suppose. So degreasers, brake cleaners, all that sort of stuff. And again, looks really good. They've got some pictures of the man himself showcasing the products.
There he is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. My only thing is it says the brake cleaner can recondition brake pads. I'm sceptical of that, but apart from that, it looks great. I think it just sounds a bit too good to be true. Like,
do you think it just takes off some of the crap that's on there?
Yeah, potentially, but it's like it's not sandpaper in a can, is it? You know,
maybe we should.
Maybe it is.
we should try it out ourselves and see.
No, they look really good, and if it's anything like their sealant, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and something that I did notice when you were looking at this earlier is it's all biodegradable as well. So they're kind of following on from the rest of the range, totally. Which I think is a great thing to do. I've got to say, so just looking back at the retro version of what that would have been. Muck-Off, of course, the classic pink stuff that everyone's so familiar with. It's a massive brand nowadays, but it actually started from a company called X-Lite. Now, X-Lite was made by Rex Trimmel. He's an ex-motorcycle engineer and racer, and his son Alex used to race for him. X-Lite at the time made some amazing components. They made a twin crown suspension fork. They made this amazing looking frame, which looked like something that we probably see nowadays, if you forget the geometry from it. Had a motorcycle shock on the rear. They made a whole range of stuff, and Muck-Off was just one of their products. But it turned out that Muck-Off sold so well they had an entire company restructure,
Wow.
and it became the dominant part, and that's the actual brand. So it's a pretty cool story,
Yeah,
I think.
totally.
That Muc-Off came from a really established brand called X-Lite, and well, there you go. There's a few cool shots on screen.
There was also the rejigging of the RockShox Reverb.
Classic.
Yeah, now it was only maybe 2 years ago that it had a new internals.
Yep.
And with that new kind of paddle style lever, which looks fantastic, but they've redone it again to make it more reliable. It's got a pretty remarkable 600-hour interval.
600 hours?
Which is huge. Wow. I was curious, so I looked up on my Garmin, Garmin Connect, you can view your hours.
Yeah.
And when I was living in Season Towns, riding as much as I possibly could, the most I ever did was 600 hours in a year.
In a year, right?
Yeah,
okay.
which if you think about it like that.
And if you're flat out trying
and that was me trying
to
ride as much as I could.
So that could potentially be 2 years for the average.
Yeah, totally. I think now it would be probably something like that for me. And I think it's awesome. Yeah.
I've got to say, I've got a couple of old reverb posts that have never been surfaced that are still working.
Yeah.
So I think if they're saying that as their recommendation.
And I think the RockShox Reverb was almost a victim of its own success in the early years. They were so popular that probably only a small percentage of them broke. But there was enough of them out there that everyone knew about it. But they were just... I mean, it opened up my riding, and I'm so good that they've kind of maybe addressed some of the reliability concerns with this one here. It's great.
Well, it's funny, I've got the second one that arrived in the UK.
Oh, really?
Right, well, it's actually not on my bike anymore, but I used to have an Ibis Mojo, and I had that seat post on it, and before that it was on a couple of Treks. Now, that bike I later sold to someone who incidentally works for us.
Oh, really?
And he's still running that seat post.
No,
it's had a new IFP on it, and it's had a couple of new bolts on the clamp, and that's about it. It's been blared a handful of times, but it's still going.
Still going.
So it does show that they do exist out there.
Yeah,
They're not just unicorns.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the dropper post I think is probably my favourite single bike component of all time, because I'm pretty sure, and I think we need to actually put this to the test, that I or you or us could ride faster on a rigid bike with a dropper post than a full suspension bike with a saddle fully up your arse.
Yeah, and do you know what? I did a race a couple of years ago. There's like I think it was like 7 hours, and I rode a bike without a dropper for the first time in a long time, and the sheer back spasms from just being in that really, no.
I did a retro shoot for GMBN on a retro bike the other day, and I thought I'd keep it real and run the saddle at full height.
Oh, nice. How did that go?
Well, I squashed an appendage quite badly, bad enough that I had to go and check, because I was like, this is bleeding, this is really bad, and I nearly put my shoulder out, and I popped both feet out of the pedals and basically did a bull ride, and you just can't ride that stuff like that. It's insane. So just going to show you an image on screen of the first dropper post, I guess you could call it that. The height's right.
Yeah.
Ingenious. It was just a spring, essentially. But it did rely on a perfectly reamed seat tube and the perfect sort of seat post that was going to slide into that. But still, it's pretty cool. And they were doing that way back in the 80s.
Yeah, because by the time I got dropper posts widely available, that was probably the time when I was old enough to be able to afford relatively nice bikes.
Yeah.
So I never really did the high-low thing. But some of my friends ran a fork spring in their seat tube.
No way.
Yeah, to just, and it was always similar sort of thing.
That's
always
a pretty good bodge, isn't it?
Yeah, which I thought was pretty cool.
I think we should do a hacks video on that.
Yeah.
Now, Commencal have been at it again. They've got a new range of kids' bikes. They've got the Clash range. So there's a 20, there's a 24, and there's a 27.5. Now, these bikes are just phenomenal. Have a look at some of the pictures on screen. These are genuine scaled-down adults bikes, not just small bikes that have been souped up. So the 20-inch one has 320mm reach and a 65-degree head angle on a kid's bike with 130mm travel. This is insane.
Yeah.
And then there's slightly more on the 24. It's got 350 reach, same head angle. And then the Junior, what they're calling it, has got a 27.5-inch wheels. That's a 380 reach and a 65-degree head angle again with 160mm travel.
Because I'm going to take a stance you might not expect. I think kids are getting too good on bikes. The last thing we need to do is give them better bikes.
Yeah.
Make kids' bikes bad again. When will the madness stop? Just hinder them. I want to stop. Slow them down. Something's got to be done. It's getting out of hand.
I'm going to throw myself out here to a load of abuse in the comments, because I'm sure it's going to happen. But right, so that 24-inch wheel bike, that is incredible. Right, when I started mountain biking, right, this is back in the old days, black and white and all that sort of stuff. My first mountain bike was a Peugeot Lynx. It was 24-inch wheels, and they were steel wheels. Right, so they weighed about 15 stone.
Yeah, were they like chromed or? Do you mean
can't remember.
Do you mean when it's like shiny for a braking surface? I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't.
Mate, the brakes didn't really do anything. Plus, I was so small that you couldn't slow it down anyway.
Yeah.
Massive bullhorn handlebars, a high tensile steel frame. And this is a very, very embarrassing picture of me as a kid with what looks like an extremely large head as well. But there you go.
Really grown into it over the years.
Yeah, I have, thankfully. But look at the difference between what in my era you had to ride when you're a kid. No chance of bunny up in that. And compared to this new thing by Commencal.
Yeah.
Kids have no idea how good they've got it. And I can't wait to see what all the new generations are going to be doing. We definitely need to make some really good kids content.
Yeah.
I think it'd be almost depressingly good.
Yeah. Oh mate,
there's so many shredders out there. Okay, now firstly for Rewind, I just want to throw you over to Steve Jones. I'm super glad he did this. He was visiting Specialized out in Scotts Valley in California recently, and he did a little cool piece on some of the early bikes.
Wow, look at the custom paintwork on this FSR DH belonging to Sean Palmer, American Sean Palmer, who I think was actually the first ever rider to win a World Cup downhill for Specialized. It's all aluminium chassis. It's got 6-inch travel front and rear, 26-inch wheels, Mavic D521 rims on this bike, and I think they look like about a 25 rim width. Shimano XTR cranks, MRP chain device, which everybody used in the World Cup circuit back in the late 90s. It looks like he's got a 52-inch chainring on there. Michelin Transalp tyres. Like I said, these were at the time really the tyres to use. They obviously gave you an unfair advantage on the World Cup circuit, and there were people who used to go around the pits at nights looking under the Michelin truck for those throwaway tyres. Looks like Palmer's got, again, look at the custom graphics on the grip shifter up on the handlebars, and of course on the derailleur down here. This really is a pretty custom retro bike. Wow, when it comes to componentry, it doesn't get much more retro than this. These are 1983 Specialized components. As you can see, there's a Specialized headset there. We've got Specialized hubs. We've got pedals, which are rather on the small side. Going across to stems of various heights and rises. And finally, these cranks here, looks like these are 32, 44 and a 54 chainring up front. Wow, how times have changed. But you know what? I think this is my favorite bike. Look at this stump jumper. It's a stump jumper team from 1985. I think it's absolutely amazing. Obviously, maybe it's the pink that does it for me, but I think what's the standout part of this bike is actually the cockpit. If we get around, look at the front of this bike, we've got true temper bars here, but look how narrow they are. They're narrow, they're straight, they're no rise. All the rise is done by the stem. Got really quite hard compound grips in there, like motocross grips, and your sort of motocross style brakes on there. You probably have to use 3 or 4 fingers to stop this bike back at the time. And then these thumb shifters, obviously you almost have to take your hands off the grips to move gear. Wow, bonkers.
Cool, thanks for that, Steve. Super cool to see that original Specialized stuff there. Quite envious you've been there. Hope to go there in the future. Now, next up in Rewind, I want to throw you to some of this cool stuff. So there's a company called Bike Ninja, and he's remaking loads of old retro stuff. So you've got t-shirts like the Mavic, SUP logo, USC, which make really cool lights and stuff, Rock Lobster. There's loads of stuff. As you might notice, there's a series of mugs available, and which leads me to something actually quite relevant. So the Hans Ray Signature Editions, if you buy any of the things from their range, they're actually given a part of the contribution to Hans's charity, which is called Wheels for Life. I'm going to throw a link to Wheels for Life in the description below this video. It's a really great charity and it helps get kids in Africa on bikes. It's a really good resource for them to be able to get to the next village for education and for water and all sorts. Fantastic and really well worth supporting. There's also the JMC mug. So the JMC, of course, the JMC, probably the most iconic British rider of all time, was sadly taken from us. Now, Jason McCroy, absolute legend. We looked at his bike earlier in the show. If you buy any of the stuff from the JMC range, part of the proceeds go to the Ride for Charlie Foundation, which of course is a very worthwhile cause. Again, there's going to be a link to that in the description below. On another note, just look at all this cool retro stuff. They've got like little Tioga disc drive beer coasters. They got, you name it, whatever retro brand you like, they're going to have something for you. And something I'm having for myself actually for the new set wall is a Tioga disc drive clock. I absolutely love that. I think that is wicked. So when we have our new set, it's going to be part of the fixtures on the wall. Quite apt because I kind of talk about this stuff all the time. And just while we're talking on the subject of retro stuff, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame, which is in Marin County in Fairfax, California, they are about to induct basically some new people into the Hall of Fame. Now there's a few people I want to talk about because you guys can all vote if it interests you. So definitely check out the website, it's super interesting, and if you're ever in California, please go and visit it. It's fascinating. We've actually got some content going out on GMBN with myself and Neil visiting that very said place. But more importantly is the people with the nominations for this year. So in particular there's 3 I want to talk about. Number 1 is Tim Manley and Steve Bear together. So Steve Bear and Tim Manley basically put UK in the mountain biking world. They started the magazine Mountain Biking UK, and Steve is one of the most established photographers around. A fantastic person, and with neither of which, in fact, I would be doing what I'm doing today because they really were the pioneers of the sport in this country. They identified it when no one else even knew what was going on. So a massive shout out to Tim Manley and Steve Bear. So you've got to vote for me, that's for sure. Hopefully some others will vote for you. Next up is David Davis MBE. Now he is the reason we have trail centres in the UK, which actually we have influenced a lot of the mountain biking world. The Flow Country trails that Hans Ray does out in Livigno, they're heavily influenced by our trail infrastructure, and that is all down to David Davis MBE. So he's another clear winner for a vote for myself as well, so I just want to give a shout out to him. And finally, the late Jason McCroy. Now, Jason McCroy is no longer with us, but he was certainly, and probably still is now to a degree, one of the most influential mountain bikers to ever hail from the UK. Jason was absolutely fantastic on a bike. It's just insane, and he really paved the way by being one of the first British racers to get a major contract from a US brand. In fact, he was sponsored by Specialized. And Jason, we'll never know what you actually were capable of doing. I'd like to think that you might have been world champion one day. You certainly influenced me, and I know a lot of the viewers that are watching me talk about you now were definitely influenced by you. So again, you've got my vote. Good luck to whoever makes it into the Hall of Fame. You're all very worthwhile alongside all of the other inductees. Please click on the link in the description below, and it'll take you through to the museum in Fairfax, California, and you can vote online for your favourite. There's loads of other entries, so please read through them. They're all really cool, and they're all ultimately why we're doing what we're doing now. So way to go, guys. And finally, yet another thing for Rewind. I just wanted you to check out the bike that I was lucky enough to ride in the retro game of bike that we had over on GMBN earlier in the week. Now this was a GT Shazang made from titanium. Now this is one of the last models, which is a 99 frame, so he would have got it in 98. Belongs to John Cannings from GMBN Tech, so a massive shout out to Cannings for lending me that, because the bike really is absolutely beautiful. It's got a set of SID World Cup forks on it, and interestingly have got a set of Judy internals on them, so it worked a lot better than the SIDs used to back in the day. And it's got a full XTR M950 transmission, the full group set. In fact, it's got the brakes on there as well. Absolutely beautiful, and I couldn't believe how well it still shifted and braked. Absolutely phenomenal. Now the bike has that really nice supple feeling that you imagine you would get from titanium, but even now it still retained that. I was quite surprised how comfortable and how much grip the bike had, even with some tyres that the first tyres I rode were actually perished, and I fitted these tyres, which are their Tamwell remakes, to try and look something along the lines of an Onza Porcupine from back in the day. In fact, speaking of Onza, there's a beer mat for that. Now, the thing that was really strange for me was getting used to the bike again was that stem on it. It's got a Syncross stem, 135mm with a 500, in fact it might have been a sub 500mm handlebar on there. My riding position, it was just dreadful to get used to compared to the luxuries we have today with the modern cockpits, so the wide bars and the short stem and obviously the modern geometry. Now, Neil and Blake were also in this video. Neil, although his bike he was riding was older, well, the frame was. It was kind of like Trigger's broom from Only Fools and Horses. You know, the only thing that was original on it was the frame. Everything else was brand new, pretty much. He had a really short short stem on it and quite a high-rise sort of bar, I guess you would say. So I don't think he had the same handling issues as me. And although Blake's bike had a massive tiller of a stem on it, it's quite upright, which again brings it back towards the rider. I found the bike really quite hard to control because of its super laid out position. It's a 19-inch frame, so it wasn't even too big for me, but the position was crazy. But I just want to basically say thanks to John Cannings for lending us a bike, and check it out. It's really, really nice. Even now, I think it still looks pretty good. Okay, and now it's time for Bike Cave, and I'm going to throw straight upstairs to Henry.
Yes, thank you, Doddy. So this week in Bike Cave, we're actually going to do something a little bit different for Retro Week. And we're going to look at some of the tools that are now perhaps used a bit less frequently on modern mountain bikes. And hopefully it will give us an idea of how lucky we are to have these bikes, which are so easily serviceable and quick to work on. So one of the staples of bikes back in the day, especially for headsets, were huge spanners like these. Now imagine if your headset wobbles loose on a ride. It's not as easy as it would be now. And you needed a couple of these. They're expensive, especially getting ones that didn't round off at the edges. And actually, working in bike shops, one of the common conversations you have to pass the time is what tool would make the best weapon in a fight? And if all these tools go out the window, then that conversation's dead. My favourite and my personal weapon of choice was often this crown race setting tool. They're still used, but perhaps not so commonly now that a lot of crown races come with a little split in them to make installation easier. There's also, to remove that, you would need this massive adjustable crown race tool, which a lot of people used to have the scars on their fork from just trying to hammer underneath it. And this was the tool that did the job brilliantly, but obviously a very expensive piece of kit to tool up with. Very heavy, you couldn't take it on the road with you, and yeah, an incredibly specialist part. You also had things like this third hand tool, which is really useful when you are setting up cable brakes. However, just an interesting thought, not only do we tend to use hydraulic systems now, but when I started riding and working on bikes, which is admittedly perhaps a bit later than the old Dodster, even if maybe we don't go into too much detail, the bleeding systems were often just a piece of tubing and you just pour the oil in the top. Now I think we're so fortunate, like SRAM's bleeding edge or Shimano's bucket system is so good, it's so clean, and it gets such a consistent bleed every time. So I think that, well, pretty fantastic. And then, you know, before Boost came along, and I'm not against Boost, but I think very objectively, before Boost came along, we were in a golden age of wheels. If you needed to change your axle size, with most sets, it was as easy as popping off 2 end caps. Prior to that, these were still used, which are actually still relatively prevalent in wheels, but I think actually they might fade away even more so. A lot of systems back then were using a cup and cone system, which is actually still favoured by Shimano, amongst others, but not the sealed bearing system, which is so good and we can put so much reliance on now. Crank systems back in the day also used a puller. This is actually a tool that confuses a lot of people actually. Not necessarily mechanics, but when they do it the first time, it's kind of can be quite counterintuitive if you don't know quite what you're doing. But now you may have noticed, and the new SRAM cranksets are a great example of this, they actually have a self-extracting bolt on there to bind up against. And that essentially does the same job as that. But yeah, really useful. Now the old headset press, which is another workshop staple, is actually almost being moved away from, with some frames going to entirely integrated headsets. That's where the angled surface that the bearing sits on is actually part of the frame. Personally, I actually still like the cups, the headset cups. I don't know why. I guess I'm just a bit worried about writing off a whole front end of a bike due to overlysing or something like that. It's probably completely unfounded worry, but it's just how I feel. Also, I only had to do it once, and I think the generation of riders coming before me probably had to do it a lot more, and that was facing headsets and bottom brackets, and that was to make sure the surface was as square to one another as possible. And I think it's very lucky we don't have to do that anymore, because it would throw your whole bottom bracket or headset out of tolerance and can make it very inconsistent in terms of performance. Now, here at GMBN Tech, we're lucky enough to have this amazing Park Tool equipped workshop. And to be honest, it is a great place to work on your bikes, and it is lovely to have all these special and specialist tools to get the job done. When we're on the trail, I think it's pretty amazing that most of all this can now be condensed into something like this, which is a really cool ratchet set from Topeak, and that's actually my go-to. It fits in there and it can get you out of so much trouble. And I just think we're really lucky that Allen keys have now kind of unified everything. People a lot of the time in mountain biking complain about standards, the varying standards, how it's all making it harder for the end user. But on that same thought, maybe we should think about how lucky we are that they've all converged to use one main family of tools for when we're working on our bikes. And that's all from Bike Cave, but it's business as usual next week, so please do get them in and don't be shy. Cheers.
Well, there we go. There's a retro GMBN Tech show in the bag. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about all this retro craziness.
Yeah, totally. And if you like these cool retro t-shirts, you can get them via the GMBN shop.
I think there's a link somewhere up there.
But they're limited in quantity.
Yeah.
So you best get after them.
100%. Get involved. Be like us. Wear this stuff. For another cool video, click down here if you want to see me nearly squash my appendage on the retro bike. Watch that one down there.
And if you want to see the original Nukeproof reactor, which is such a cool bike, it's got a bike check with Doddy, click down there.
Give us a thumbs up if you like retro mountain bike stuff, or if you don't like it, give us a thumbs up anyway. Cheers, guys.